Hi all, how you doing today? Today we're going to talk about attending to precision, one of the standards for math practice. And to kind of talk about that idea, I want to talk about a recent encounter I had with a teacher, a recent observation, and we had a conversations and thinking about some next steps, some modeling, and some coaching there too. But really, this teacher was noticing that they want their students to be a little bit more precise and kind of spend more time thinking about, okay, do I have the right answer? Looking at different pieces. So they asked me to come to their classroom and observe them and walk through and just kind of be a fly on the wall to kind of see where we are. And I saw the teacher putting a lot of effort in. I saw the students on task, and that was wonderful and great things. One of the things I did notice, and I noticed this in a lot of classrooms when I walk into them, is the students were doing some work. And the teacher assigned some work and said, "Okay, now I want you to try a few practice problems on your own." And the teacher was walking around and broke that plane, which is always a wonderful thing to see, where the teachers kind of walk around and kind of in and amongst the students to kind of be able to get a real good vision of what the students are doing. But one of the things I did notice in this particular classroom, again, as with other classrooms, is there were a lot of hands up in the air. And as I kind of observed to see what was going on, what I found is that a bunch of the students were finishing a problem and then raising their hand and asking the teacher to come over and check it. And then another teacher would raise their hand and the teacher would come over and check it. And the students were waiting for the teacher to come and kind of validate their thinking and say, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? And many of the times the teacher would say, that looks good, go ahead and move on. Or other times the teacher might say, hey, I noticed there's a small error here. Take a look at this and see if you could relook at it. Or even maybe even one of those times where it's, hey, relook at number 4. There might be a small error there. And the teacher really spending a lot of time with each student to help them kind of think about those next steps. One of the challenges with this, though, and we see this in a lot of classrooms, is when a student's hand goes up, they're waiting, it's kind of wasted time in class. And there were definitely times when I looked around the room and there were 5 or 6 or 7 students waiting with their hands raised, waiting for the teacher to come over and check on their work. And again, that's good that they're engaged and that they want this teacher's validation. However, what we find is that they're not really owning the math themselves. They're not really internalizing how to be precise for themselves and how to check for themselves. So some possible next steps that we might take is one step, it's kind of a quick little easy fix is we could think about, okay, before you raise your hand, before you have me check your work, I want you to try and solve the problem with a second strategy. And then what often happens is if you can solve it with a second strategy, a second completely different way of doing it, we don't like to say check their work and go ahead and check your work, because when we say check your work, a student often looks down and says, yep, looks good to me. And then they raise their hand. If we ask them to solve it with a second strategy and they continue to get the same answer, it's more likely that they have a precise answer. It's more likely they're correct and they can think through it. If they have different answers, they might begin to second guess themselves and think on their own and have their own math agency thinking about some of those pieces. And then another piece that sometimes teachers are a little bit afraid to do, but we would definitely encourage this, is instead of the teacher walking around checking work, offer an opportunity where students begin to check the work to the person next to the right or left. And when I say check the work, I actually try not to say that term. I try to say, hey, talk to each other about the strategy you used. Compare the different solution strategies you meant, as opposed to just check your work or just check your answer. Sometimes there's not really a lot of discourse, and it's one student's right, one student's wrong, and that's not really going to be discourse. Or maybe they're both right and they don't do, or both wrong, don't do. So again, we can think about, okay, after you finish trying this with a solution strategy or as you're working, I want you to turn to your partner, turn to someone next to you and say, okay, how did you solve this? What was the solution strategy you went? And of course, the conversation usually lends to kind of go into what was the answer. Let's check for precision. But the nice part about that is it's students checking the precision of their own work. It's not you having to go play that whack-a-mole and kind of knock out those hands as we go through here. Students are beginning to do that. And what you can then do is take a step back, observe the students, observe what's happening, and see which students are tending to make sense, which students are tending to be a little more confused. And you can take some next steps there too. It's not all on you. So if we're trying to work on that attend to precision, I would definitely try and recommend thinking about, okay, do I have a lot of students raising their hand waiting for me to go check in on them? Or do I have more interactivity like this? And thinking about, okay, if I want to take off some of the need for validation from the teacher, think about, okay, can I have students solve it with a second strategy? Can I have students solve it in a different way and see if they get the same answer? Or possibly check with another student about what was the strategy you used. And again, I would challenge you to use those phrases as opposed to just check your answer. Because when we talk about strategies, a deeper conversation typically happens. And then you can also eavesdrop to hear some of those strategies and share them out later. So try that out, see if that works for you. Again, as if we're thinking about this, how do we enable students to take more of that heavy lifting on their own, of checking their own precision as they do that? All right, Al, have a great day.